Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining the 2020 Teacher Leader Summit virtual series. My name is Ashley, and I will be your session host and moderator. You are attending session L053 this morning. We do ask that you take a look in the bottom left-hand side of your screen. Please turn off your microphone and your video for streaming purposes. And now I'm going to turn the floor over to our presenters, and they can start whenever they're ready.
Great, thank you, Ashley. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, Andrew, you're good.
Great. Thank you for joining, everyone. My name is Andrew Palermo. I'm the Director of Leadership Initiatives. My co-host for today is Jennifer Tuttleton, who is the Executive Director of Talent Pipelines. We are both in the at the department in the Division of Academic Strategy. We will be leading you through the session today. We have some three great panelists that will be also joining us to share what is happening in their school systems. And we are going to go ahead and get started. This is the session from planning to action, effectively using your professional development resources. So our session of description and objectives include well-designed professional development is an essential component of the comprehensive system of support for both teachers and students. This session shines light on professional development models that illustrate how school systems in Louisiana have created structures where teachers in all grade levels in core content areas receive orientation to the curriculum, content module redelivery, opportunities to collaboratively prepare for units and lessons, and ongoing support. This session objectives include provide an overview of the need for educator professional development, identify scheduling solutions and strategies for teacher professional development, and explore the impact the professional development models have had on teacher and student performance. Here's our agenda for today. We're going to look at professional development overview. We're going to introduce our panelists. There'll be ample time for you to type some questions into the chat box where our panelists will be able to answer. We'll wrap up after several different sections of presentations from our panelists and questions. We'll have like one final wrap up of Q&A. We'll have closing remarks and then we'll wrap up. Before we get started, we wanted to stop and let the group reflect on these 4 questions. So before I have Ashley switch us over to this participant poll, I want to just give everyone about 30 seconds to read all 4 questions, because these are the 4 questions you're going to be asked to vote on and talk about a yes or no answer to these 4 questions. So the first question, do content leaders in your school provide foundational curriculum training for teachers through delivery of the content modules? Do teachers in your school have time set aside for unit preparation? Do teachers in your school have the capability to participate in virtual professional development as necessary? And does your school system partner with a curriculum vendor to provide content module redelivery and provide support for teachers with unit preparation? So these are the 4 questions you're going to answer in the poll in a couple seconds. Answer all 4 questions, and then we'll share the results of the entire group. Ashley? The poll should be up. Thank you for everyone who's voting. keep those votes coming. We have about 64% of the group has voted so far. So keep the votes coming, then we'll share the results. About 10 more seconds, and then we'll close the poll out and show the results. All right, Ashley, you want to share? There we go. Ashley, can everyone see the results, the poll results at this time?
Yes, Andrew, they should be able to.
Great. So as you can see, with our first question, if content leaders in your system provide foundational support, 72% of you said yes, that they provide that foundational curriculum training for teachers through the delivery of the content modules. For question 2, do teachers in your school have time to set aside for unit preparation? That was even higher at 79% of the vote. If we go down to question 3, do teachers in your school system have the capability to participate in virtual professional development as necessary? 81% of you said yes. And lastly, when we talk about ongoing vendor support, if your school system partners with a curriculum vendor to provide content module redelivery and provide support to teachers in unit preparation, that 74% of you said yes. So we wanted to look at these questions as we get started today to see where everyone was at, to get a baseline, so that when we hear the strategies from 3 separate school systems, we would have this context and these poll results kind of in the back of our head. And hopefully we can kind of get other people, if you don't have a plan at this time, to have something that you can concretely take away from this session. So I'm going to kick it over. Ashley, I think we can take the poll results down. I'm going to kick it over to my colleague, Jennifer, who is, like I said, the Executive Director of Talent Pipelines, and she's going to take us through this next section.
Thank you, Andrew. Based on the poll results, I believe we have an excellent group of participants here who have initiated professional development plans. As everyone on this in this session recognizes, school system leaders across the state are currently building professional development plans that bring training, support, and tools to teachers to ensure delivery of high-quality lessons each day that meet the needs of all students. And we are excited to bring a panel of experts today, and I say experts in that they are best of class, providing, are going to be able to provide an overview for what they're doing as a system to address the needs of their teachers and their students. As I said, everyone in this session and educators across Louisiana want students to have the opportunity to first build knowledge of the world, read meaningful text, express ideas through writing and speaking, and solving complex problems. In order to do this, as we said, all school system leaders are working on developing professional development plans in order for all students to achieve grade level standards. All teachers, including special ed, L, and reading interventions, must deliver high quality lessons. In order to do so, all teachers need a foundational understanding of the curriculum, facilitated time to prepare for unit and lesson delivery. To support teachers with this vision, school system leaders are working on professional development plans that include content module redelivery, and unit and lesson preparation. Andrew, can you hear me better now? We're hearing in the chat box that our audio is breaking up.
I hear you better right now. I didn't hear you. So some people are saying yes, they can hear you much better now.
Fantastic. Sorry about the technical issues.
Thank you, everyone. Keep the chat coming if you can't hear us.
So what we're going to share with you all today is a case for well-designed professional development. Today, my colleague and Andrew and I have assembled a panel of what we believe is best-in-class examples of well-designed PD, both rural and complex school systems. What we all know is that well-designed and implemented PD is an essential component of a comprehensive system of teaching and learning that supports students to develop the knowledge, skills, and competencies they need to thrive in the 21st century. When we think about professional development and the complexity at a school level, what we recognize that you will hear from our panelists of how they are leveraging teacher leaders. Well-designed professional development includes utilization of teacher leaders. Here in Louisiana, we have at least a minimum of 5 teacher leader roles on each of our campuses. We have intervention content leaders that help bridge the learning gap by working with content leaders who have a deep understanding of ELA and math content pedagogy. They also work alongside mentor teachers who have knowledge and skills to effectively coach and support. They work with professional counselors on graduation plans for post-secondary success for high school students. And they also work with professional learning partners. These are organizations outside of the school system who partner for curriculum and training and coaching. At this time, we're going to hear from our panelists. Today, we have assembled an excellent panel of educators from across the state of Louisiana. And as we said before, they come from both complex, large school systems and smaller, more rural school systems. We have Superintendent Nikki Mann from Caldwell Parish School System. And Nikki is going to share her area of focus around professional learning partnerships. We have Sean Hayes, Director of Teacher Development from Jefferson Parish. Sean will share their systematic approach to professional learning. And we also have the Director of Federal Programs from Sabine Parish, Deborah Lee. Their area of focus is principals as instructional leaders. And at this time, I'll shift. And Andrew, if you could take our panel, thank you.
Great, thank you. Jennifer, I think we're having a little bit more cutting out. Group, can you hear me as I'm looking at the chat? Great, so I'm hearing yes. As Jennifer was talking about, I'll give everyone just a second to look at the panel again, their position and titles from their school systems and what their area of focus will be for their time and when they will be speaking to us. Just give everyone 10 seconds to look at that. So as we move into the panel, we'll have a couple sets of questions where the panelists will unmute themselves and start sharing their approach to their professional development plan. So there'll be different sections. In between the sections, there could potentially be time for us to stop and have the group ask questions in the chat so that you can get some of your questions answered. So if there's something that Sean, Deborah, or Nikki says that you want to dig into a little bit more, there will be time either in between the different sections to do so, or at the very end before we wrap up the panel, there'll be a Q&A for the entire thing. If there's something that was said that you didn't get an answer on, or if there was something said that we just didn't have time to get to, we will definitely do that. If there's ever a time where your question is super specific to your system, we may follow up with you afterwards, because we're going to have Ashley download the chat afterwards so that we can follow up on anything that is lingering. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into our first question. So we're going to talk about the systematic approach to professional development. The central question here is, has your school system created structures where teachers in all grade levels and core content areas receive an orientation to the curriculum, content module redelivery, opportunities to collaboratively prepare for units and lessons, and ongoing support? We're going to start with Sean and Jefferson Parish in this systematic approach. So Sean, go ahead and unmute and take it away.
All right, good morning, everybody. So glad to have you all here. I also want to give a special shout out to, I did notice that I have a plethora of Jefferson Parish Schools leaders and employees on this call. So thank you for being here. I'd like to, as we begin this portion about systematic approach, to begin by saying that this work is way too big for any of us. And so I'm just honored to have so many of the people leading this work in my own district on this call as well. So it just warms my heart. So I work in Jefferson Parish Schools, which is the largest school system in the state at just about 52,000 students and about 6,000 employees, of which about 3,500 are teachers. And so as we go in, we're going to look at what system-wide structures have we put in place to address the professional development needs of our educators within our district. And in our district, it begins with a very systematic approach that's backed by structure. And so that structure is set in place by our superintendent, Dr. Cade Brumley, in his plan 2024, The Future Our Kids Deserve. Andrew, if you could just keep scrolling, please. And so in this plan, what we do is it examines all the core tenets broken into 6 succinct goals that the district has. And so everything we do is rooted and grounded in this work. I almost call it the Bible of Jefferson Parish Schools. It is a very comprehensive, very rich piece of reading that I have linked in this presentation for anybody who wants to take a look at it at a later time. But basically it outlines every key lever that we need to do to get our school system where we believe it needs to be and should be for our students. But within that, we also have to know our why. And so in our system, our educators across the board are enamored with why do we even exist? And that's, of course, to provide the education that our students deserve to succeed in a better place. And then the actions to support that. So we're always looking at the why and then looking and analyzing the actions that go into making that happen within our school system. And so in order to carry out this plan and to provide this education, our professional development specifically teeters around 2 key goals within that, but really the professional learning aspect is embedded in no less than 4 of those core goals. Andrew, if you could go forward, please. And so all those goals asking is, what is the most important to achieve our goals? And so these are the 6 core goals that I alluded to. And with our professional learning plan, we're really focused on 2 particular things, although as I said, they live in many of them. So Andrew, if you could 2 clicks, please. And that's to hire, grow, and keep the best teachers, and hire, grow, and keep the best leaders. So all the work that we've put in behind the scenes around the structural pieces really are focused around retention in our school system and growing them through high quality professional development. Of course, something that has come to light in the last 2-3 years, majorly for us, is that prioritizing access around equity and opportunity as well has come into the forefront, not just because of COVID-19, but just in general to ensure that all students have access to and equity in lessons and in being developed as students on their path to career and college readiness. Andrew, please continue. And so everything that we structure around our professional learning in JP is focused around our 3 big rocks put out by the Teaching and Learning Unit. And so all of our professional learning is designed around the implementation of Tier 1 curriculum with fidelity, ongoing job embedded PD, specifically through instructional leadership team and clusters, although we have a much larger, robust, comprehensive listing of professional learning opportunities than the district that we'll talk about as we go through here. And then using walkthrough and observation evidence to provide timely, actionable feedback that is growth-oriented, not punitive. And so constantly reevaluating not only our professional development, but also our daily those practices that we learn from PD within the context of student learning within classrooms is one of our key initiatives in Jefferson Parish. Andrew, next slide, please. And so in Jefferson Parish, our professional learning is always rooted in content and curriculum. So each year we provide offerings in foundational, accelerated, and advanced tracks of learning, which are getting more diverse and complex as we go forward. One thing I think in Jefferson Parish is that we've never been afraid of the complexities of a large school system, of which this is actually the second large school system I've worked for. And so it does have its complexities, but it is possible to provide meaningful and differentiated support for all educators across the district. We are a TAP district, if you're not familiar with that. Andrew, yeah, stay there, please. We are a TAP district, which TAP is Teacher Advancement Program by the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching, or NIET. And so we use their rubric as best practice in instructional practice in classrooms, which is something that our school system has invested in heavily for our educators. And most importantly, student work and data, and letting the student work drive the actions and learning of leaders, teachers, parents, et cetera. And so we ask that our administrators, district officials, teacher leaders, teachers themselves, when they're doing peer-to-peer observations, that all the things they are looking for can be found in the student work. Student work drives actions for our educators in our district, and we use that consistently and are keeping pulse all the time. And so our professional learning is led by a variety of educators, and we always follow the 5 steps for effective learning, and it's determined based on the need, using multiple data sources such as student work analysis, standardized assessments, diagnostic assessments, and benchmarks. Andrew, if you go forward. If you are not familiar, on your screen are these steps for effective learning. It's very important to delineate that we take these very seriously. These are not the steps for effective teaching, although they can go into it, but effective learning. That's effective learning for all stakeholders, whether it be a paraeducator, a teacher, a district official, a student themselves. So we always follow this trajectory in every single PD we do, whether it be a school level cluster, whether it be a district-led professional development, whether it be another unit's professional development, which we started to slowly branch out into that arena. We always follow this. We identify the need, we give time to obtain new learning, and we always allow time for development of new learning, which is so critical to educators actually buying in and utilizing the learning that is within the professional development. How many times have we all gone through and we go through a PD and it's all for naught because there's no follow-up, there's no time to actually plan for it, there's no this or that. So in the majority of our professional learning, when applicable, teachers have the time to actually develop what they're going to do to then be able to turn around and apply it within their classrooms. Or if you're a leader, apply the new learning to your ILTs or your clusters in your school. Or if you're a district official, apply that to your building principals and down and so on the timeline. But arguably the most important piece for our professional learning could be the evaluation piece. And that what is the impact on student performance? And what's very important to understand that whether it is a high-level district PD for leaders and principals, whether it's a cluster on a school campus that's meant to inform teacher practice, or whether it's just the teacher to the student in the classroom, it's critical that we are evaluating the impact on student performance, or the professional learning that you invested in was all for naught in your district, and to see, did that actually have an impact or the intended impact on student outcomes, which should be the most important aspect in any professional learning plan. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Sean. We're going to hear next about some professional learning partnerships from Nikki and Caldwell Parish. The central question here, before Nikki takes it away, is how has your school system created a more more coherent approach to strategies for assessment, instructional materials, and professional learning by developing meaningful professional learning partnerships. Nikki?
All right, good morning. I'm Nikki McCann from Caldwell Parish. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay, good deal, good deal. All right, you can go ahead and switch to the next slide. All right, good. So back in the fall of 2017, Caldwell Parish School District partnered with ANET, and we knew that we needed a strong, more coherent approach to our assessment, our instructional materials, and our professional learning. And so when we first partnered with ANET at the district level, we decided to evaluate and rebuild our assessment strategy. And then we continued the partnership to redesign our approach to professional learning and ensure the strong implementation of a Tier 1 curriculum. So this basically took place in about 3 phases. The first phase was the work with the district level with less testing and more instruction. Caldwell Parish operates on a 4-day school week, and what we found is that our teachers were teaching every day, and then we were having these testing events every Friday. And when you begin to think about the amount of time that was taken away to give these assessments, we were losing a lot of teacher instructional time. So we worked with ANET, received the training on how to use the formative assessments that are already embedded in the curriculum, and use that to formulate a grading policy that took us away from testing events and shifted to more of the testing as we go and giving grades for formative assessments. As a result of that work, we were able to give our teachers back 7.5 more days of instruction per year. And I've linked our grading policy there so that when you get this slide deck, you can kind of look at that. But this work led to a 3-year partnership with our middle school, Caldwell Parish Junior High, through a Circle grant. You can switch slides. So phase 2 was the work that began at the junior high. And at this point, we decided we needed to evaluate our strategies for professional learning and instruction. We knew that our teachers, if they were going to be implementing a Tier 1 curriculum, that we needed to work on making sure that they understood what the expectations were and why the curriculum was set up like it is. So we again enlisted ANET support. We sat down together and set a clear vision for instruction and strategy for our professional learning that we could implement immediately at the middle school level. ANET helped the Caldwell team plan how to build skills and knowledge for teachers, school leaders, and very importantly, our district leaders, so that we were all learning together. This plan incorporated the use of our Tier 1 curriculum, and in Caldwell Parish, we used the ELA guidebooks and Writing Revolution, and eventually we were able to pull in our junior high math program, Illustrative Math. And it helped us to leverage our content leaders to help lead that professional learning. In phase 3, which we feel like is the strongest implementation because it takes time, we felt like our teachers had a strong foundation and they were ready to focus on curriculum implementation. So we conducted periodic walkthroughs on our own and then with our ANET coaches. We had deliberate PLCs where our teachers were unpacking units and spending most of the time on content as opposed to business of the school. We implemented, this is probably my favorite part, but the mid-year and end-of-year focus groups for our students and teachers, because if you really want to know what's going on in the classroom, all you have to do is ask the students and they'll tell you. So we were really able to figure out if we were getting the message across to our students. And then asking teachers, you know, how things were going and how they felt really helped us to adjust our practice. Teachers and leaders learn to leverage their PLC time and our district-wide PD for curriculum training. We set up and protected schedules for shared grade level planning time and shifted the focus to looking at student work. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of times, I assume most districts are the same way. You have these great plans that you kind of fall apart on as things get going. What we found is that our work with ANET helped keep us focused and grounded in what we were doing, and they didn't allow us to drop off or phase out. So with that hard work and that leverage of our teachers. In the fall of 2019, we felt like we were ready for something more intense. And at this time, we implemented the ANET coaching model. And in that, we were had access to the ELA and math interim assessments. And of course, we had been giving assessments, and we knew what to, how to look at the data when it was over, but we didn't know what to do with the data to improve our instruction. And so this coaching model really helped our teachers preview these interim assessments to know what they needed to teach. And then we conducted data deep dives based on those interims. And it allowed us to expand our focus to the standards and the curriculum implementation with not only our ELA teachers from the Circle Grant, but we were actually able to include our math teachers. And I'll be honest, this ANET data analysis protocol really shifted our focus on assessment from the results of assessment to what could we do to improve our instruction so that we could address gaps in student learning that were actually just revealed by the assessment. So it was huge for us to get to this point.
Thank you, Nikki. Some people, when they requested access to that link, needed permission to view. If you
Okay,
could maybe
I'll fix that. It'll probably be after this, but I'll fix it.
Yep. Thank you, Nikki. We're going to shift gears to looking at Sabine Parish and Miss Deborah. The central question here is we're going to be talking about system-wide structures to address professional development needs. And the central question here is, how has your school system focused on standards-aligned instructional practices, what students are to learn, and how to address the different problems students may have in learning the material? Deborah?
Hi, Andrew.
I can hear you. Take it away.
Okay, great. You can move. Okay, thank you. All right, so we had all the components in place with our teachers, and some of the things were, of course, we had implemented a Tier 1 curriculum. We had focused on training content leaders and getting those people in place and getting them trained and they knew what they were doing. Ongoing lesson level improvement. We were doing professional learning communities. The piece that we were missing was training our principals in what to look for in the classroom. They were focusing on the compass rubric, which of course, is necessary, but there were some components that were missing in as far as implementing the curriculum and what they were supposed to look for in the guidebooks. So that was kind of where the direction we took, and we partnered with School Kit, and we just finished year 2. So what we did was, in conjunction with training our content leaders, we let our school principals into some leader professional learning. In year 1, we had 6 days. In year 2, we had 8 days of training. And those things, that training focused on 3 areas: the protocols to support effective teacher planning, evidence-based questions and tasks, and deepening student engagement with the guidebooks. And we put together a steering committee, and School Kit worked with us very meticulously on expectations, developing learning walk guides based on some of the state information, plus some of the things that we expected to see as a district. We were using the guidebooks, the writing revolution, and all those components, but we needed to make sure that our teachers knew, our principals knew what the expectation was when they walked into a classroom. And we did these learning walks in groups so that the learning took place right then. We debriefed, we gave each other feedback, and our principals had some great comments about it, and we've really seen some increases in what they're learning. Go to the next slide.
Great. Jennifer, you want to take this back over, and then we'll switch sections. Jennifer, are you back on audio? So we're gonna, at this time, for our first section of questions, we would love, I know I've seen some of them pop in the chat and Nikki responded to the one that was specific to her. We would love any questions that the group has for what was presented so far about the overview to be dropped into the chat, and our panelists can go ahead and we'll collect some of them for about a minute or two. And then our panelists can start responding to those. And then we'll move on to the next section. So go ahead, take a minute or so to drop any questions you have just about the professional development overview in the chat right now.
Yeah, I can take that, Andrew, if you're okay with me just hopping in. Donna, that's a great question. So clusters are based on the way the schools schedule. And so most schools, it depends on the time. If they have a 90-minute block, they'll have one a week. If they maybe have a 45 or a 60, they may have as many as 2.
Yeah, Andrew, I can answer the question about the learning walks.
Go ahead.
Okay, so the learning walks consisted of, we would have a half-day training and the principals would get some guidelines on what we were looking for on that particular day. And then we had already scheduled ahead of time to go into a school for the last half of the day. And we had some rubrics, some walkthrough forms that we would take, and we would all go into the same classrooms and look for these components individually. And then when we walked out of the classroom, we would kind of talk about it a little bit, but at the end of the day, we would meet as a group and debrief on each one of those components and come up with an action plan for what we would expect to see next time.
Thank you. Anyone want to take Jody's question about common planning time?
Sorry, Andrew, I just typed in the box. I didn't want to interrupt. I think it was Nikki who was speaking before, but yeah, it's a little bit of both, Jody. It's the whole premise of a cluster anyways is that there is some development time. So there is authentic planning with usually grade level, subject different clusters, or vertically aligned, same content area, or they do a mix of both in the week, but also outside planning time as well, like you would expect in most school systems.
Thanks, Sean. Nikki, you have a question for Caldwell.
Okay, so are there any forms, routines, or procedures that bolstered effective student work analysis? This really came into play this year with the coaching model with ANET, in that we began looking at the interim assessments weeks before we actually gave those to students. And so the teachers were very familiar with what standards and skills would be addressed on those assessments so that they could tailor their instruction. And so when the students actually took their assessment, it was a direct reflection of what the teacher had been teaching or how they had been teaching that information to the student. So when it came time to look at the results of those interim assessments, We narrowed in on certain questions that had broad standards or skills that needed to be addressed. And especially like in the writing, we were able to see what was the missed learning. If it was ELA, maybe their writing revealed that they didn't understand a major shift in the story. And so that allowed our teachers to go back and teach students how to identify the shifts that take place in the story. If it was a math assessment, the assessment results would reveal like what percentage of students missed certain questions. And so we could go back and actually look at those questions and say, where did the mistake take place? What did the kid get right? Where did the kid mess up, so that we could correct that learning for the student? So basically the entire process was the way that we analyzed that work. And that kind of gave us the forms and routines and procedures through that.
Great, thank you, Nikki. Anyone want to talk about the rubric components that Shelly asked about? And then we have a call for a question.
Yes, Andrew, I can address that.
There you go, Deborah.
Okay, so what we found in looking at the Compass rubric and some of the walkthrough curriculum implementation walkthrough forms provided by the state was that in the Compass rubric, you focus on the planning and instruction domains, planning domain, instruction domains, and most of the curriculum implementation rubric information falls within domain 3 of the Compass rubric, which is instruction. So we looked at those components and pieced them together, and so that when they walk through the classroom, they can actually look for the implementation of the curriculum within the instruction domain.
Thanks, Deborah. And Noelle has a question, and then we'll take this last question, then we can wrap up and move on to the next section.
Sure. I assume you're looking at me, Andrew, about Noelle. So how do you balance using rubrics such as those from NIET and content rubrics from the LGOE? Well, I guess the way to start with that question would be it's a very fine balance. So one thing we've gone into and are going into for this next school year, that's not giving away too much, Andrew, I promise, is a balance between NIET's gold standard sort of an instructional practice with our partners at SchoolKit, who are in our second year partnership in terms of the content. And so we really spend a lot of time and energy focusing on the cross collaboration with that, because of course, content knowledge should live with pedagogical knowledge. And so we're going to invest in quite a bit of training around that. I'm also going to allude a little bit to that in the next section. And then how do you balance in terms of meetings, focus on content or general pedagogy? So it's a little bit of both, because cluster meetings, of course, are driven by student work and student data points. And so we don't tend to view them agnostically unless we absolutely have to. Every meeting is embedded within a curriculum and brings in best practice from the NIET instructional best practices rubric. And so it's kind of a marriage. It's not easy, but our educators have really risen to the challenge and do a great job of really making sure that those live harmoniously, because I think, as you're kind of alluding to, those cannot live separately. If they live separately, you're going to fall short in one area or another.
Great. Thank you, Sean. So I'm going to kick it back over to Jennifer. Jennifer, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Thank you.
So our next section, go ahead, is around systematic approach.
Thanks, Andrew. So we've heard from folks about how they have implemented systematic approaches to implementing the professional development. And we've heard some hints about how Jefferson, Caldwell, and Sabine are supporting and monitoring. But let's go into a little bit more detail. And I'm going to turn it over to Nikki to talk to us about how Caldwell Parish is working with ANET to create a system of support and progress monitoring. Nikki?
Okay. So the box on the left is basically the relationship that we have with ANET and how they come in. And so one of the measurements that we use are the classroom observations. And so 3 times a year, the ANET consultant will come in, and together we review the implementation of Tier 1 curriculum. We look at lesson plans to see how they were annotated. And then we go in as teams to see how it's being implemented in the classroom. And throughout the process of our time with there, we were able to see that at the beginning it was a little bit of Tier 1 and a little bit of not, to the point where it was all Tier 1, but we knew that we needed to get more towards what were the students giving us back as opposed to what teachers were. So those were very revealing. Our second measurement, like I said earlier, is definitely my favorite, the student and teacher focus groups. And we did those at mid-year in about December, and then again in May at the end of the year. And this helped us to learn about the teacher's implementation of that Tier 1 curriculum and the quality of the professional learning that we had provided them, as it's measured by student perceptions. And so we sat with students, we tried to get a very broad array of students that we sat down with, and we asked questions that would lead us to know what's actually going on in the classroom. And we were able to use those, the results of those interviews and focus groups to help us make some shifts in our plans and make sure that, sometimes it may be that we're not using the right vocabulary or the language, and then just to make sure that what we're doing is, or planning for, is actually happening in the classroom. The next measurement was just observations of the PLCs and professional learning times, and that took place 1 to 2 times a year, where they monitored the progress and the quality of those professional learning opportunities. At the beginning and end of the year, there's also a teacher survey, and that helps us kind of plan for the year and where we are and where we need to try to get to. And so just gathering that teacher feedback on their professional learning is very helpful. And then, like I said, this last year, we implemented the ANET interim assessments, and we do that quarterly. And this allows us to measure student progress on the standards and analyze the results for progress and reteaching, which, like I said, is the biggest thing, is how do we go back and reteach when we know our kids have not hit the target. On the right-hand side, a lot of work goes on because on the left-hand side, that involves teachers directly. On the right-hand side, the district and school leader check-ins, they have a little bit different structures. And so we were able to meet with our consultant virtually, bi-weekly on a phone check-in, and that allowed us to focus on our goals, to kind of evaluate where we are we making progress, and if we're not, we could problem solve as to how we were going to get where we needed to go. It was a very fluid situation where we are, checking in with each other. There were monthly step backs on the progress to say, do we need to scratch this and move in a different direction, or have we hit that goal and we're ready to move on? And then there's also the quarterly in-person visits. And so we spent time with our consultant outside of our teacher time, that we were able to work out a plan. And at the bottom there, I have attached our progress monitoring results. And this takes place throughout the year, but as of March 2020, you'll be able to see where we were on the goals of our plan and had we met them, or what were our next steps.
Thank you, Nikki. Andrew, could you go back one, please? I really appreciate, and I'd like for the participants to be able to look at your slide again, of how you all have utilized in Caldwell various stakeholder groups. I see students and teachers. I see teacher surveys, and how you've engaged at the district level, and that's phenomenal. In a few minutes after we hear from Jefferson, we'll open up the chat and allow folks to ask more questions. I suspect people will be interested in hearing more. So at this time, let's shift to Sean, who is going to talk to us about support and progress monitoring in Jefferson Parish. And they have a 2-prong approach with some district level activities and then school level activities. So Sean?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Nikki, as well. So I think Nikki was the perfect person to get us started because there's so many of those things that are just good practice across any school system anywhere in this country. And so thank you for leading us off on this section, Nikki. And so from the district, especially a district as large as Jefferson Parish, like I said, 52,000 students, arguably, actually not arguably, the most diverse school system in the state, the most employees and the most schools probably in the school system. Our approach has to take a couple of different prongs. And so we try and balance what is district-led and what is school-led, but also not just within those specific, but who is leading those portions in each particular aspect. So for this portion, I'm going to focus on a lot of the supports that we provide in terms of job embedded and non-job embedded professional learning in JP. So first and foremost is our rolling professional development, which we consider that our differentiated responsive system of professional learning in all core subject areas, and it's determined by the needs of educators and leaders using data points, student work, observation analysis, and stakeholder surveys. And it's also timely based on units of study. So something I want to clear up also, it's very important to the idea that we're always embedded in live time and in curriculum-based professional learning is that we always tie everything to make it something that an educator can use, turn around and use tomorrow in a lesson if they choose to do so. And so it's very important for us. This is something we implemented just a couple of years back. And so we've continued to do that and have expanded to virtual offerings as well. These occur after school hours and are for teachers, paras, leaders, differentiated by who is in which group and who may need different supports. And those are often led by district school support coordinators and or other district leaders. We are going to look shortly to expand that to teacher leaders leading that. It's a part of I would say my 3-year teacher leader development plan. And so we're getting there. But then we also have our district professional learning days. And so we're going to continue with the district here. We have 4 dedicated full days of professional learning across our district. And that's for all core teachers, special education teachers, and English as a second language teachers. And they are separated into subject and grade level specific learning cohorts. And they engage in the redelivery of tailored content modules designed to meet the needs of curriculum. So this is what you probably are thinking it is. It's very similar to the state's content leader model, of which I'm very proud. Actually, Jennifer was one of the steering members of Jefferson Parish's approach in terms of having every stakeholder at the table, and she was one representing the LGOE. And so we take the content leader modules, except we chose to do it kind of on, we hyped it up. It's like it's on steroids, if I may be a little off kilter there. And so what we do is we divide all of the districts teach. It's about 27 to 2,800 people into exactly like you said, subject and grade level specific. So a kindergarten, we'll say kindergarten ELA teacher, a teacher may have voiced that they need more support in ELA. And so they were assigned to an ELA cohort, and they will go through that cohort of learning for 2 years, led by a teacher leader. I think it's very important in our district is that a lot of our professional learning is led by teachers, actual practitioners in the classroom that have been trained and go through extensive additional training continuously to improve their craft and to lead their peers, which adds a whole nother level of respect and responsibility to those people. Those are led by our content leader fellows, and we offer those in all of our tier 1 subjects. So we don't just, we didn't just decide to redeliver the state content models. We actually chose to expand that. So we do all of our guidebooks folks. We also do CKLA for our K through 2. Jefferson Parish created their own social studies content leader track. That's literacy based, which has been really exciting and has been really well received by those folks. And we've also are embarking on science this year. But something that's really flexible for us is that we tailor it to our tier 1 curricula. So it's not something that's just kind of out there, but it's actually tailored. And even the development and the new learning teachers are getting in those trainings are grade level and content level specific, with connections to vertical learning as well. So we're really excited about the promise of that. We're also going to be expanding this year to leader cohorts. And so somebody asked a great question, I think it was Noelle, about the idea of content and pedagogy. And so we're also going to expand our leaders to study that paradigm, but also how to effectively support, and I mean support, in every which way, teaching and learning in the classrooms in both those areas around our tier 1 curriculum. We offer a summer professional learning series every summer. It's all types of new learning for all levels of educators. And it, once again, is based on curricular needs and also changes the upcoming school year, looking at all the various data points, many of the data points that Nikki mentioned, along with some additional data points we have in-house at JP. And there will also be is where we do a plethora of our core training for leaders. So our principals, our APs, our master teachers, our CLFs, and our TLFs. So something important to understand is that our schools are set up with structures to where every school, of course, has a principal. Every school at least has one master teacher. We staff our schools at a 1 to 15 teacher to teacher leader ratio, or teacher leader to teacher ratio. And then 58 of our 71 campuses have content leader fellows. So we've expanded our teacher leader pipeline from about 98 in my first year to just over 300 teacher leaders in the district leading this work. And so this year, something new is that we're going to create a new teacher focus starting end of July, which we call Embark. And they're going to go through a summit, which will engage new educators in all core areas in a 4-day deep dive of curricular resources, lesson annotation, and unit preparation, unit planning, backwards design, and model exemplars, to where our goal is that all of our new teachers will have essentially acquired parts of the foundational content leader practice and leave that summit with a unit planned, at least in 2 subjects, and at least 2 lessons already planned, ready to teach, and to have modeled for them along with coaching to support them. We also have teaching and leading and leader clusters. So leaders at both the district and school level monthly engage in new learning that's based on leading school level learning and then how to support new learning and development at the school level. And then those leaders engage in processes that mirror what teachers are asked to do. So when we bring our leaders in, we're not sitting on this high end, like I'm the leader type of thing. We want leaders to practice just like a teacher would to the best that they can jump into that learning. Because it's very important for our leaders to really be grounded in what they are supporting and to understand the actions that teachers take every day to best support them to actually grow them and to grow student outcomes. If you go to the next slide, please, Jennifer or Andrew. So instructional leadership team meetings are non-negotiable. Those occur every single week, and those are weekly meeting of leadership team members. And so in our schools, it is required that all principals, APs, master teachers, and teacher leaders are required to serve on the instructional leadership team so that we have representation at all levels. Content leaders also serve if the school has them. And so those are dedicated for data analysis. They look at student work analysis, observational walkthrough, data, curriculum development, and cluster planning as well. And they look at all the data they have. They look at the progress against the school's short and long range goals, and they adjust as need be. And so the principal leads this team. That's very important. This is the principal's time to shine. And she or he are responsible for the new learning and development for those team members with assistance from the team as well. And so the weekly cluster meetings are led by the master teachers and teacher leader fellows under the support and guidance of the principal and assistant principals. And those are your weekly or bi-weekly, it depends on the type of schedule that you're on, meetings of subject and or grade level banded educators. They collaborate to analyze student work, first and foremost, for evidence of impact from prior new learning. So all the learning in our district is very connected. We don't just hop from PD to PD for the sake of hopping. We do our best, although we do fall short at times, of connecting learning at all times, and also making sure that educators are grounded and brought into the work, specifically our teachers who are the practitioners in the classrooms, to consistently be almost like an experiment. They call it field testing in TAP world, where teachers are consistently field testing new things, bringing it back, redeveloping the structures, and things that we've put in place and to go forth. We don't just set up plans in JP and just carry them out to the end of the year. Now, I don't want to cause panic to anybody. We always have a roadmap, but it's very important to make sure your roadmap is flexible enough that you can get off of the exit and still get back on the highway. And so we always are very adaptive. I like to call it that we are very anticipatory, but we're not afraid to be reactive in a positive way. So then we also have structured planning time. I do want people to understand, I know you're hearing a lot of these clusters, ILTs. We still do dedicate and protect planning time. Teacher, that is protected time, but they do go through clusters 1 or 2 a week, and they have the opportunity to plan and to obtain new learning. And to our schools that are really, really engaging in this process in the right way, incredible cultures and climates on those campuses of progressive learning for all teachers and definitely for all students and learning. And so last but not least, I want to just give a last structure that we have, which is our district school support coordinators. These are district level content experts that are utilized in a network support. So we have our schools branched into 5 networks that a team of each network has an ESL an expert, a SPED expert, content core level experts, and then it has the network director who leads the principals in those networks. And so what I like about these networks is while we have aligned learning from the district level that everybody goes through, these networks are very, very honed in on the needs of each of their schools and their networks. So they're like a family within a family within a family, in essence. And so we make sure that those are very, very aligned everywhere. They provide professional learning and planning support and coaching in collaboration with master teachers, CLFs and TLFs at schools, and they can also be requested by teachers utilizing the teacher support menu. So we are a very fluid district, and we like to make sure that if somebody needs help, they get the help they need and that it's timely and actionable because students can't afford to wait for anything else. Thank you.
Sean, incredible. Both you and Nikki are getting some great shout outs there in the chat box. One of the things that I really appreciate is the purposeful nature of how these school systems are supporting and monitoring their professional development plans. What we heard is how leaders at the district level and at the school level are really leveraging teacher leaders, intervention content leaders, mentors, professional school counselors, and also leveraging partnerships with outside entities to help support the professional development plan. So definitely hats off to you all. This is a very timely conversation because at this time, school system leaders across the state are building PD plans and revising those plans that are bringing training, support, and tools to teachers to ensure the delivery of that high quality curriculum. So what I would like to do right now is stop and take a look in the chat. We have some questions coming through, and others, please feel free to continue bringing forward some questions. So we'll pause for a moment and see what questions we have.
So I can answer a couple of these if you'd like, Jennifer.
Okay, go ahead, Sean.
Caroline, we decided that we needed to invest in a robust structure of sustainable growth in capital, human capital, as you would say, in our district. And so a master teacher is an NIT position. So we have 2 entities. We have our traditional TAP schools, which are our transformation network. So our schools that are traditionally either underserved or not performing well, are not, I don't want to say at the bottom because they're doing great work. They just maybe have their challenges that other of our schools don't. They have an even larger cadre of support. So I'm going to be speaking to the majority of our schools, though, which are called best practice TAP schools. And that's about 58 to 60 of our schools. And so they have a master teacher. Master teachers, their whole job is to support teaching and learning on the campus. They do receive an increased stipend in our parish of about $7,500. They don't teach a full course load. However, I don't want to say that as an absolute. So we have some that do still teach. They might teach a section or a course while they're also leading. So they're in and out of classrooms 80% of the day, co-teaching, modeling, supporting new learning from cluster, giving relief to a teacher to help support them so they can view what effective practice may look like, especially if they need to model, as well as giving release time to teacher leaders so that teacher leaders can go around to support the learning and goals of whatever teachers they might be supporting to create a culture of growth at all times. And then content leaders are they're teachers, but that program is controlled at the district level because they're primarily used for district professional development. And then teacher leaders are actively teacher leaders at their campus. They teach at the campus, they lead at their campus, then they lead under the tutelage of their administration at their school.
Great, thank you, Sean. I want to acknowledge, I believe it's Tara who says, As a teacher, having a cluster with content and a cluster with grade level, she is acknowledging that it's very beneficial to have both be held weekly. There is a question coming in from Donna. It says, is weekly cluster meetings and structured planning time during the same time slot? For example, is it the third period every day cluster and on a assigned day? And would the leadership meetings be during the same time also? So Sean, by use of the word cluster, I'm going to direct this question to you.
Certainly, and thank you for the question, Don. You've had a couple really good ones, and I love getting myself to think too, to make sure I'm thinking all this through correctly. So it's different on every campus. There is an semblance of autonomy, especially when you get to like the high school level, because they are on different types of schedules. We have some, ABs, we have some blocks, we have some, whatever other schedule the high schools come up with. High school's a whole different beast. But traditionally, yes. The ILT, we asked them the instructional leadership team, the leadership team meetings are asked to be held the same day, same time, all year long. For some, that's after school. For some, that's before school. For some, there's a dedicated block within the school. It just depends on the school itself. As for your clusters are typically, yes, on the same days, same times. The only difference is like maybe they have to have, if a school has a vertically aligned like planning / cluster, and then they have a we'll say just an entire grade level planning type of thing with mixed, they may have a Tuesday at 2, but they may have a Thursday at 9, just depending on how it works out with schedules. But I would say that most of our schools, everything is completely consistent. It's so fluid that it becomes a part of the daily schedule within the schools.
Thank you, Sean. A very important question we have here from Veronica, and a resource that's much needed by many of our school systems. I'll direct this to both Nikki and to Sean, although Sean, I don't think you all will have this scenario. Veronica's asking, are there any examples and resources for schools that have one teacher per grade level? And Deborah, please feel free to answer that question. You all may have that scenario in Sabine Parish too. Do you all have examples or resources where you only have one teacher per grade level for collaboration? Deborah or Nikki, is that your scenario?
So in Caldwell Parish, it definitely is. At the junior high, which is the school that we're working very strongly with ANET, there are 2 ELA teachers per grade, and in math there's only 1 per grade. And so that's where we find that the benefit of having those professional learning communities as a content area, so that at least you have other math teachers in the room who are able to kind of help with the standards and the progression. And we also include our special education teachers, and occasionally we pull in our special education paraprofessionals as well to make sure that we are all hearing the same thing and having the same discussions. And even though they're not teaching the exact same material because they're different grade levels, at least they are teaching the same content. And it really helps us to see the progression of those skills and standards as they're moving. In the ELA, we even grade writing together, so that like our 7th grade teachers know what their 6th grade, that when they finish up what they're getting, and then what they need to know before they get to 8th grade. And so it's a challenge for a rural district for sure, but that's the best way that we have found to make it work.
Thank you, Nikki. So
I agree.
Go ahead, Deborah.
I agree with Nikki. It is a challenge. We also have at least 2 schools that have 1 teacher per grade level in kindergarten through maybe 5th grade in all 4 subjects. I mean, it's quite a challenge, and we've done the same thing in Sabine. We've put them with the teachers that teach the same content, maybe not the same grade level, but the same content. And plus, if the instructional coach works with them on that content. So it's worked out pretty well for us.
I can give a quick example. I think one thing to understand, I think that my counterparts, Nikki and Deborah would also agree, is that with your schools such as that, Jefferson Parish does have a school that has 1 teacher per grade level. That would be Grand Isle. If most people didn't know, Grand Isle is a Jefferson Parish school. And so we really get creative with how we support them, not only because of the distance, but because of the capacity on campus. So I can tell you, I actually staff them differently for teacher leader fellows. They have 4 teacher leader fellows. Actually, they have 6 for a school that is not very large. For that sake, we also try and look at innovative ways. So like I know we talk about, of course, mixing the content areas, or like having, more of all your ELA teachers across a huge span. We do something similar, but one thing, I've tried something this year of where having one teacher teach more of those bands. So instead of having, a first grade ELA teacher teach all the core subjects, they've chosen to actually, that it might be more beneficial to break them out as the first grade teacher who currently teaches first grade ELA becomes the K1-2 ELA teacher. And they have a 3-4-5 ELA teacher. And it really has helped their support of learning about progressions and how to better plan more effectively. But I think they've also started to have a lot of success around how to more quickly impact student growth and achievement by having a much more firm understanding of those progressions and how standards and content along with pedagogy work together, if that makes sense.
Yep, great. Here's a question, and this can go to anybody on the panel. How are you all bringing in L coaches as a part of your leadership team, or is this exclusively content leaders or mentor teachers?
Yeah, I can take that if you want. So we obviously, I'm not sure the percentage, but we, I think Jennifer would probably know may know the number. We literally have a substantial number of the state's L population and educators. Yes. That is a very, very challenging prospect, the one that we are already on the horizon. We have, first of all, we have a robust offering of English language supports in our district, from all different types of immersions to traditional ESL classes to newcomer classes. And so they are represented on most leadership teams. A lot of those people also serve as teacher leaders or content leaders. But something I think that's started to show promise is a model that was studied, I believe it may be out of the University of, help me out here, Oklahoma, I believe, and around the ESL coaching model. So the majority of our schools starting next year will have a dedicated ESL coach that is there to help support with planning and implementation of best practices with our students that English is a second language. And also what we're looking to do is, as always, in the efforts of expanding what we do, but we had to walk before we could run. And so we piloted this last year in our district content leader model, having ESL coaches within the cohorts to serve as co-facilitators to be able to more appropriately, how would you say, differentiate for the learners in those cohorts. And also to go beyond that, I have full intentions of taking the district data and redistributing the cohorts to ensure that we have our cohorts that our schools that serve a high population of English language teachers, as well as our schools that serve an extraordinarily high number of students with special needs, that we more appropriately group them, and to have people who have proven expertise, proven growth results with those students to be leaders within those cohorts, and to start building a best practice that spans across those schools and across the district.
Great, that is fantastic. So at this time, I'd like to encourage our panelists to continue to watch the chat box. We've got several questions coming in. I also want our participants to know that we're going to share contact information, and we will also be downloading all of these questions so that we can follow up to answer any additional questions that are there. For the sake of time, though, I know one really important piece that we want you all to have the opportunity to share is, we understand that you have robust plans. You have great ways in which you are strategically supporting and monitoring. However, I know our participants really want to hear about the so what. How has this impacted your school systems? And so I'm going to turn it to my colleague, Andrew, to lead you all through sharing of some results around your professional development plans. Andrew?
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. As Jennifer said, we're going to move into, the results that each school system has seen as a result of their professional development plans. So first up, we're going to talk about the results that Sean and Jefferson Parish have seen from their system and their strategy.
Yeah, sure. And so something I want to lead with, we have much more qualitative data at this point. We were sad that, of course, we're not going to see our LEAP data this year, but we do have a lot of data across a number of measures. But primarily in Jefferson Parish, this strategy of PD also has spoken to largely, and I'll view this as my opinion, but a culture shift, if you will, and a climate shift in Jefferson Parish. Once again, thanks to many of my Jefferson Parish colleagues who are on this call for being the ones that lead this change. But, it's important to understand, kind of about our strategy in itself, what we look for. Number one, this strategy is continuing to evolve, as I think I've kind of alluded to in many of my feedback on the questions. And the idea that we have to continue to refine and grow practice. So our mindset is consistently shifting into a growth mindset. We have to be willing to give each other grace to make mistakes and the grace to correct and to be better every day. And that's what drives this professional learning strategy and drives the mentality to eventually lead to results for kids that we so desire. Our strategy is aligned, but continues to be tweaked to better serve teachers and students. Like I said, being proactively reactive, it can be a good thing. We're very anticipatory and responsive to our needs. We differentiate where possible. One thing we're trying to get better at is, even with our teacher leaders, our building principals, is understanding just how you would differentiate and scaffold for a student in a classroom. How do we appropriately differentiate for adult learners, which is a very, very different process, while also honoring the experiences that every teacher brings, whether they're 5 days in the classroom or 5 years or 20 years in the classroom. It has a balance for all types of educators. Its alignment is rooted in the district's master plan and the 3 big rocks, but also includes optional training and required training to promote the expectation of learning for all, and then includes multi-stakeholder input. So much like Nikki, the most successful, the number one reason I've been getting a lot of comments is to, the size and the scope and the robustness of what's happening in JP. That starts with stakeholder input. So much like Nikki alluded to, there is not a single decision we make, from our scopes and sequences to our benchmark assessments, to our teacher leader criteria, to our content leader, even tracks of learning, that a teacher and or a principal or district staff and even LDOE staff does not have stakeholder input in to build these. Because if these structures for stakeholder input and support are not there, then your structures will fall apart in one way or another. And you can go to the next slide. And so as the data sources we're looking at, of course, we're looking at LEAP 2025 as the highest level in terms of the overview. We also look at our benchmark assessments. And so I know many districts have benchmark assessments, but I think what we do with ours is very, very critical. Number one, they are teacher vetted and teacher expanded, I like to say. So the district creates them, but teachers get the chance to expand on them. And we really, really value the insight of making them not only appropriately challenging, typically more challenging than the LEAP 2025 assessments at times intentionally, but also making sure that we are aligning to the volumes of equity, making sure that the content is pertinent to everybody and it's not singling out things. I think that's very important. We use walkthrough and observation data. So our teachers receive a walkthrough every 2 weeks at a minimum. Those are informal check-ins, typically looking for key indicators that they may have used as their area of refinement in their observation. And so very focused. And it also could just be looking at the status of watching a teacher implement something they learned in cluster to get some feedback to bring back to cluster. We also gauge all our progress from all of the above against the school's short and long-term goals. Every school has short and long-term goals that are linked both qualitatively and quantitatively. And so you're kind of bringing all those things together. We look at cluster meeting feedback. And so that data guides adjustments needed for participant learning and success. And so it's something that we really value and that teachers get their chance to really impact, but also keeping in mind that the best feedback that we can get from a cluster meeting is what teachers bring back every day, every week through their student work. For District PD Day, we do have some semblance of qualitative work, which we'll get to a little bit of what we've seen in just a little bit. But we look at qualitative and quantitative data that's collected based on the new learning and application from prior PD days. That's based on the need, the relevance of the new learning of the day, and also the applicability going forward. Sorry for the not completed statement there. For the student work, it's brought to every cluster. There's not a single cluster, and if it is happening for any of my Jefferson Parish schools on here, it should not be happening. But every cluster should have student work, and that includes our instructional leadership team meetings. So our instructional leadership teams also look at student work to drive decision-making, especially as it relates to informing teacher practice. It's the most useful lifetime piece of information there is to guide instruction and determine success or lack thereof of new learning on student outcomes. And we also used a robust tool called EEPass. It would be the equivalent of kind of like SIS, but it's for TAP districts, and it creates an abundance of district-based reports and school-based reports. Let me tell you, this has been very, very eye-opening for me because I enjoy and revel in the ability to go in and to be able to see trends across all of our schools. And so that a lot of times is also used in decisions, and we don't hide those. Those are readily available. We make that information available to all stakeholders at every level, so they understand where things are coming from as a district. So Andrew, if you want to go forward. So this is something that's just very a proud moment for us. So our model of district professional learning with the content leader twist, we are not certain, but in terms of scale and scope and the type of learning that's occurring, arguably maybe one of the first in the country. I have led another type of leading learning this size in another state, but not with this type of focus on what really, really matters for student outcomes and with so much teacher leadership. But what this represents are the 5 content leader tracks. And then we also have a pre-K track just as a side track. And what these numbers represent are a couple of things. Number one, the data from this survey looks at a number of factors. It looks at best practice from NIET. It looks at impact on student learning. It looks at teachers' thoughts and ability to impact this and to take and utilize this learning in their classrooms, of which we do monitor through walkthroughs and of course, observations. And it also just in general monitors their satisfaction. And so what this data really shows to us is that we started bold and we did okay looking at August. Something else got cut off, but we looked at August 5th, which our numbers were in the high 80s, low 90s. Then we go to September and we jumped into the middle 90s. We take feedback very seriously. We made every single change, whether it be to learning, to how the presentation was being connected, to how it was being supported, to applicability. And we made sure that we made those changes for our educators. And the numbers obviously showed that it increased greatly. Going forward all the way to where we ended in January, which was our last day that we were able to record data for. STEM Scopes was not led by teacher leaders, but it was led by STEM Scopes. And so next year it will be led by our teachers. And so we saw the most impact from those. And what's very important to understand in this paradigm is that this learning at the district is supported at the school level. Is it perfect? No. And I as the leader of that work, am going to take that blame. And so something that I really want to make sure that we do a better job of, and it was something that we minorly did, but I have some ideas of how we could do it better, is to make sure that what we are doing in District PD Day is able to be directly supported at the school level. And it was able to be supported. It was just to a degree that the principals and the leadership teams were not getting what they needed far enough in advance to be able to ensure that they are supporting the learning. And so we look forward to a lot more data to come, but I'm going to stop there for this portion. Thank you for your attentiveness.
Thank you, Sean. Nikki, you want to take us through some data from Caldwell?
Sure. So like I said, we're in our 4th year of our work with ANET, 1 year at the district level and then 3 years at the school level at the junior high. And throughout this time, we have made some great strides. One would be that 7.5 days of instruction back because of the way that we are making our assessments so that we have more time teaching with our students. We are at a point where we have 100% of our students engaged in high quality curriculum and 83% of our teachers using the curriculum as intended. We were able to narrow our professional development focus from 10 areas to 2. And this came from one of those surveys where we had to really get serious about where we were and what we needed to change. And that was very eye-opening to see that we were kind of all over the place, and we narrowed our focus to just 2 areas. Our biggest celebration was that in year 2, our ELA summative LEAP 2025 results was a 13.4 gain in our assessment index. And that's kind of explained in the chart below. And I stop here to say it did not happen the first year. And we were a little upset about that, but I will say that our teachers just kind of came to the plate and said, you know what, we implemented the high quality curriculum, but we may not have absolutely done it the right way. And so this buy-in was huge for them, so that by the time we got to year 2, you can see that we had huge gains. So the way this chart looks is there's the 2019 proficiency rate. That is in comparison. The green means we were above the state. The red means we were below the state. I always like to kind of look, where do we stand compared to others? And so we looked at that 2019 proficiency and then the school average, compared it to, as you move across the chart, to our 2018 proficiency. And in each one of our grade levels, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we grew by 14 points, which I don't know how they all got 14, but it was pretty amazing. But huge gains for our ELA department. And then if you look over to the far right, they're the letter grade that represented. Now, keep in mind that Caldwell Parish Junior High is a D school. So to see those kinds of letter grades pop up in the C ranges was very exciting for us. And this particular year, it's not on here, but I wanted to share with you, we noticed an overall growth in our assessment index of 2.4. So we were at a 58.5, only 1.4 points shy from that C. And we knew we were going to hit it this year. We had brought our math teachers along board too. As a matter of fact, when there was discussion about whether or not we were going to come back, our teachers, and this is amazing, our teachers were like, let's take the optional test. I want to know what my kids did. They were that excited about the growth that they had seen in their classrooms that we were totally bummed we didn't get to test. But that's a huge gain for us in that year 2 of our support.
Great job and great work, Nikki. We're going to switch gears to Sabine and Deborah. Go ahead and talk about the success in Sabine.
Thanks, Andrew. Some of the things we take a look at are student data, teacher evaluations, the VAM results, classroom observations, and the number of content leaders that we have earning micro-credentials. Some of the shout outs that we have for Sabine is that in this 2-year progress of work, we've had increases in our assessment index in ELA. We've increased the percentage of students scoring mastery and above. In our walkthroughs, in our learning walks, we've had from our fall to our spring results, we had 100% of our students engaged in high quality tier 1 curriculum. We had an 11% increase in the percentage of teachers using the curriculum as intended. So that was a big plus for us, because the first year, it was a hit and miss. Teachers were using some old material. So it took us about 2 years to get to the point where we had most of our teachers on board with using the tier 1 guidebooks.
Great. Thank you, Deborah. I'm going to kick it back over to Jennifer, who's going to talk about recommendations as we move forward.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. For the sake of time, I'm going to voice over some of the highlights from our panelists' slides and recommendations that they have that they wanted to share with you all. So, Andrew, if you could move forward. So in talking with Deborah, some of the things, Deborah, one of the things I remember specifically is you talked about that there needs to be at the highest level of the organization, buy-in from the superintendent. And what you wanted to share today was definitely get an aligned, well-developed vision. And I thought that was particularly important as you've over the past weeks been sharing with us. I think it's very evident that you all also have a strong partnership with various professional learning partners, and your principals are definitely buying in. So some excellent work there. Please don't hesitate, participants, to reach out to Deborah and Sabine if you would like to hear more about those recommendations. And for Sean, I think that we've all learned today in this session how important it is, and your one big recommendation as we talked about this was that building internal capacity in order to carry out the work. No one person at the central office, as you shared with us, has been responsible. You all have leveraged teacher leaders. You all have created community and internal and external stakeholder buy-in, and really align the priorities using data and the systems that you all have. And so I really encourage folks to reach out to Sean or others on the call if you want to learn more about this. You all also have a strong partnership with School Kit, with NIET, and you all are really leveraging them in some really unique and innovative ways there. I love your last bullet, Sean, where it talks about give educators grace to grapple and grow, but expect the growth. And that's a message that I think has come through today, very strong. And lastly, Nikki has shared these recommendations about being honest and revealing with your consultant. And I think this is a really a highlight of what you wanted to share, Nikki, is that, you know, let your vendors know and direct them to the needs of your district and help them hold you accountable for that. And I love the fact that you're also talking about celebrating successes and shifts in teacher thinking. Creating those short-term wins are incredibly important for the sustainability and for folks to continue to follow in the vision. You talk about how you finished year 3 intense school level work, and we heard you voice over about being persistent and continuing to be persistent in the vision, and you explained the 3-phased process, which is excellent. And I did notice, Nikki, that some folks came through the chat wanting to learn more about that 3-phased process. And so as you will see here, Nikki has given us a link to some resources for Caldwell Parish, so please feel free to access that. In closing, I would like for quickly Deborah and Nikki to share with us how they're pivoting in light of COVID-19 and the responses that they have there. And then Andrew, I'll kick it back to you after that to close us out. Nikki or Deborah, would you like to do your quick elevator speech on how you all are planning to pivot to online professional development if necessary?
Sure, I'll go ahead and start that. We had already, with School Kit, we had already started doing some online and virtual support groups over the last 2 years, but simply because scheduling sometimes got difficult, and especially during the unit unpacking and the redelivery, we had them do call-ins, and then they did some virtual components through Zoom. And some of our steering committee meetings were also through Zoom. So we already have those components in place. And so as we move into the new school year and professional development opportunities, we're just going to keep doing what we've been doing and schedule those Zoom calls as needed and move forward.
Same thing in Caldwell. We have, because of the nature of our work with ANET, a lot of it was already done virtually. So that's, we'll just continue. One of the exciting things that we have moving forward now is that ANET was already ready to reach out to help us with this loss of learning. And so they've developed diagnostics, and we're starting, shortly on how do we start addressing loss of learning and how do we plan for that. And so we're going to lean heavily on ANET to help us get through this next year.
Great. Thank you all. Sean, if you could you take a moment and give us a few highlights here? How are you all shifting in Jefferson?
Yeah, it was a pretty quick, and I won't say seamless, but it was, because of our educators, it was as seamless as it could be. All of our PD went digital immediately. We didn't stop. Cluster meetings continued. They did not stop. Instructional leadership team meetings continued. Our biggest challenge, of course, as many across the state faced, was the idea of not being able to have immediate access to some of the resources we needed. But COVID-19, we were able to print all of our learning packets and stuff. Then we finally were able to transition to a lot of online stuff. So, but changes going into next year, we're planning for 3 different scenarios actively, and also aligning our professional learning around that as well. All PD will automatically be required for the entire next school year at a minimum to be prepared to be delivered virtually at any moment, even if we're planning for it to be in person. And so we're naturally already planning in that. We're investing in PD around designing and implementing effective virtual instruction with curricula, which is something that's not on our summer PD calendar to my educators that are on here, but it will be coming. I think it's also important to consider this new norm or an accelerated jump into the 21st century teaching and learning if we weren't there. As a district, we're viewing it as a transition to blended learning that is purposeful and ready to be implemented authentically, whether we are in person or whether we are at home. But also I look at it as an opportunity to invest in our educators in a very unique moment in our country. PD plans will remain consistent and adapt to the new climate. And then grace will be given, of course, as the learning curve may exist.
Thank you, Sean. We could probably spend another hour talking about how we will all need to probably pivot in the unknown future for sure. So at this time, we are going to ask that you continue posting questions because we will not be ignoring those. I see folks are doing that, but for the sake of time, we're not going to voice over those questions at this time. But I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Andrew, who's going to close us out with a participant poll and sharing resources with you all. It's been a great session, and Andrew, back to you.
Yep, like Jennifer said, we will share everyone's contact information, but just in the interest of time, we won't go through this Q&A at this time, but you'll have everyone's email addresses and you can reach out directly. We're gonna have now hearing everyone's presentations and all the panelists, we wanted to go have the group answer these 2 poll questions. So the first one has 3 multiple choice options and the second one has a yes or no. So before we present the poll, we would love everyone just to take 30 seconds to read and get your answer ready. So after hearing the panelists, which of the following areas do you want to adjust in your current professional development plan? So that's content module redelivery, unit preparation, or collaborative planning time for teachers. And then in light of COVID-19, has your school system begun shifting professional development plans for the 2020-2021 school year from in-person to virtual sessions? So Ashley, if you could put up that poll for everyone, take a minute to answer, and then we'll close out. Thank you. Take another 10, 15 seconds to answer the poll questions, and then we'll share results. Great. So as we can see from the poll results, after hearing the panelists, think areas of focus would be the collaborative planning time for teachers got the most votes, followed closely by the unit planning and then content module redelivery. And then it looks like based on COVID-19, a large majority of the group is already thinking about what that shift looks like for everyone. So great, thank you for that. We can stop sharing the results and we will move on. So in closing, we wanted to just share some resources that everyone has readily available to them. So all these links are available to you, and the PowerPoints will be shared so that you can have this at a later time and can access those links later. We also wanted to provide the contact information for all of our panelists and also for myself and Jennifer. So take a moment if you want to grab anyone's email address before we close out so that you can follow up with them afterwards. But we really just wanted to say thank you to our panelists. You know, Jennifer and I really have spent a couple weeks and a couple Zoom sessions, just the 5 of us talking about this session for a while. So we want to thank them for their time and showing what they are doing in their own school systems. We want to thank their planning time for creating their slides and getting all of that ready and preparing to share with you. So thank you, Deborah, Sean, and Nikki for helping us out with this session. Thank you to all of our participants who joined. But at this time, we're going to close out. We hope everyone has a great day.